Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Bhakti Speaks. And as most of you know, we like to talk to luminaries and teachers and leaders and delve deep into their subject matter and who they are and what they bring to the table. And today I'm very excited to have a dear old friend who I haven't spent much time with, but who I've been respecting his work for many, many years. So please welcome Jai Dev Singh. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Sridhar. It's a pleasure and a blessing. I'm excited to connect with you again.
Okay, good. So many of our listeners are not familiar with your work. So could you just bring us up to date as to what got you here? Where are you? What kind of work are you actually doing? And just give us a broad outline and just talk about yourself. Most of us don't like to, but go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, well, I grew up in the Southeast United States and in a Jewish family, and then, but when I was 18 years old, I discovered Kundalini yoga, and I discovered yoga, I discovered Dharma, and growing up in the Southeast and South Carolina, in the Bible Belt of the Southeast as a Jewish kid, and then in my teenage years, really found myself on a search, and like so many of us in the Western world, that search, to me, one of the main vehicles for that helped me on that search was music, really. And from, chiefly music of the Grateful Dead, music of in that time also even the underground dance movement music, and then eventually kirtan as well, but first psychedelic music and the music of Bob Marley and the music of Burning Spear, and these were all my great first teachers, really. And well, we say the first teacher is always our mother, actually. But once getting old as a teenager and finding teachers outside of my loving and beloved family unit, it was the artists, and I can say still to this day that's kind of still the same. Like, I think of even myself more almost as an artist than like a teacher, because I find, in the Western world, it's different, of course, than being in India, and what teachers are to us, and our relationships with our teachers it has a different cultural context. And these days where I do find myself being a teacher and very much do embrace that role, I also find myself as I'm most inspired in a more artistic context. And so as an 18-year-old, that was true for me. And I was trying to follow the path of production in the recording industry. I was I'd moved near Nashville, Tennessee, to study production in the recording industry, and I came across this yogi. And back in those days in the Southeast, there wasn't like yoga studios, really, or if they were quite rare, and like a hatha yoga or something like that. But he invited me to do this thing in his backyard across the campus from where I was, and it was a Kundalini yoga class, and I don't remember a lot about it, but I went to that, and then I went to another one later that day, and I felt like I was kind of floating for a week, and it made a real impression on me, and I started doing it, and then there was no one around, and so we started doing it with our friends on the campus where I was going to school, and that just kind of grew, and I somehow never stopped in a certain way. And and I love yoga, and I love the Dharma, and I'm so grateful. And I was just telling somebody this earlier this week, is that I'm, 25 so years after that, I'm more interested and fascinated by yoga practice, Kundalini yoga practice, Dharma practice. I'm more inspired, I'm more enchanted than ever before. And I feel so fortunate in that regard. And so we have what's called Life Force Academy, and that is the main kind of organization and vehicle for the work that we do, which is largely based in Kundalini yoga, but we also produce music, and we also we I think we put so much of our energy into trying to create meditation experiences, yoga experiences, both in person and online. And we've put a lot of, well before the pandemic and anything else, we've been working in the online medium and trying our best. And I think we're relatively successful, trying our best to make it a awesome experience, a cool musical experience, a cool visual experience, and something that's fresh and inspiring, because sometimes spirituality can feel a little stiff, a little rigid and a little uptight. And as we know, that's not necessary. And I'd like to,
Can I
yeah,
interject a second?
please
Could you
do.
please, let's go back. Just explain Kundalini yoga for a second.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kundalini yoga in this context is a more specific system of exercises and meditations done in Kriya, in the context of different Kriyas, exercise sets, meditation techniques, pranayama breathing techniques. But really, mantra is the main thing. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, because if you see this particular system of Kundalini yoga from a distance, it doesn't necessarily say, well, mantra is the main thing, because it's physical, it's aerobic. Sometimes you move your body. There's a lot of breath work, a lot of breathing. But what it really, to me, is a way of helping the physical body have the vitality it needs, and the mind and the emotional bodies to have the relative kind of contentment. And that comes from using these kriyas that help to center the life force in the nervous system. When the life force is relatively centered in the nervous system, the chi, the prana, starts to move in a more rhythmic fashion. So now the mind is less worrying, anxiousness, insecurities, even though we still, human beings, will feel all that stuff, but less dominated by it. It loses, my experience, loses that extra edge and electrical charge, that where it's not just some worries, some real worries, but worries come and worries go. When that edge is away, then they more easily can go and not become the habit and something we get stuck into. As I'm a worrisome person, I'm an anxious person, but no, I'm rather like, I want to be a joyful person. I want to be a person who's having a good time, but not at the extent of turning away from the difficult parts of life and the suffering of life, but in fact, quite the opposite, to have the courage and the vitality to be able to turn towards the difficult, suffering parts of life, because that too is what is going to strengthen my love, strengthen my joy. So anyways, Kundalini yoga in that context, exercise system, meditation system. Kundalini yoga in a bigger context, like we would, if it was used perhaps like in India, is a much larger thing than that. And I think the discernment between those two things are important. But this kind of system of Kundalini yoga is unique in that sense that it draws upon the great Kundalini yoga traditions of India. And it's a specific system of kriyas, exercise sets, meditations that help a person feel good, really.
So this is a system that you've developed.
No, I learned that I didn't develop it myself. No, I learned from my teachers. And
Kundalini yoga has been around tens of thousands of years, but this particular system that you have adapted,
yeah,
is taking all these areas and putting them into what you think is a good teaching point.
Yeah, for sure. My approach to it, certainly I've developed, and even and part of the most exciting part of me is, as you know, I've worked with Simrit and her band, and we work very closely together. And so we produce and we create lots of incredible music that is really kind of designed in the sense that we're not saying, okay, let's make this piece of music for this type of thing, but they'll play as we're doing the experiences. And so much of the music that has been born out of that has been really inspiring and fantastic to me. So that approach includes all of that too, the musical experience part of it, and that's what I love it.
So how did your beginning awakening get you to this point?
Mm-hmm. To where I am now.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
People like to know
The story.
the
Yeah.
relations.
Yeah. Well, when I was, when I was younger, I was, I never could really find a way to where I felt like I was fitting in, and I tried everything. And, and so when I found the yoga practice and at that point I had already been reading. My dad had told me about the Dalai Lama. He didn't know all that much about Dalai Lama, but he told me about it and planted the seeds, and I started reading all those books from Dalai Lama that I could find. And then I had the experience in Kundalini yoga class, and that really caught my attention. And at first it was a way just to get high, really to get lifted, because that's what I needed and that's what I wanted, because nothing else was really making sense. And and I had already by that time experimented with all the psychedelics I found, and so forth and so on. So I was oriented towards this kind of mystical search. But then once I found Kundalini yoga, I was unable to really focus on the other things I had planned to do, such as recording industry stuff and school. And I ended up moving out to, and I had also suffered from a lot of health challenges as a teenager. And I had moved out. I found out through yoga about Ayurveda, and I moved out to Grass Valley, Nevada City, California area about a little over 20 years ago, to study Ayurveda at the California College of Ayurveda. And I spent several years there working at the school, helping administer Panchakarma after graduating for some years, and love Ayurveda. But what I wasn't expecting is how Ayurveda really, it taught me also the science of yoga and Kundalini yoga, and taught me more clearly how was it working at the elemental level, at the level of the human organism and the physical tissues and the energetic body. And it really helped me put a lot of pieces together. And I did work for some years clinically with Ayurveda, but then I realized over time that my dharma is with teaching, and that's what I do really well, and that's where I felt like I could be most helpful. And so I've been teaching Ayurveda and yoga ever since, and that really formed, along with Jyotish and Vedic astrology, but that came later. And that really formed kind of the backbone of what we do in Life Force Academy is the Ayurveda, yoga, Dharma practice, and it's a cool thing. And what I like about it is it's, it can be done. It can be secular for people who tend to be more, oriented towards a more religious point of view. It works for that, but it doesn't have to be that. It works for really kind of anyone. That's what we put care into. We're not promoting a specific path. We're not trying to get anyone to join our club. It's just about doing what we love and doing what I found to be helpful, and sharing it with others, and having a good time doing it. And it works as, to me, a simple way of staying connected to my creativity, of the things that keep me inspired, the things that keep me happy, and those are the things that help me traverse the very difficult parts of my life when I'm going through those seasons, which those come, and those, and that's always a real thing. So don't want to paint a fluffy picture, that it's all like this, but it's also very difficult.
Yeah, that's our daily sadhana, and we have to take all the good stuff and all the negative stuff and work through everything as it comes up. It's not just a rosy, honey pot, bees fluctuating around. Is the Life Force Academy a basically online, or do you also have retreats and teachings?
Both. We're online, and we have members in like 120 countries now. But we also have, we do immersions or retreats. We do one here that every year in June in the Nevada City area. Have you been up here to Nevada City any, Sridhar?
I like the area. Yeah.
Yeah, I would think you would love it here. and we do that in June, and then in the fall we do one at my dear friend and mentor Robert Thurman's retreat center in the Catskills, Menla Mountain Retreat. And we've been doing them there for the years, and he participates with us, and so those are the two big immersions we do. And now we also have our center in downtown Nevada City, Life Force Academy. So we're both in person, but our main kind of thing that we do is produce the online experiences.
So people join, is like a monthly subscription, or how does that work?
That's one part of it. For people who want to, they can be part of that. But we're also doing almost every full moon. We'll do some big event session. Those are free usually. And we do all sorts of things in our membership. I'm teaching every week, and that's where all the music lives, and so forth and so on. But then we have many other courses. If people want to take deeper dives in Ayurveda, deeper dives in yogic astrology, deeper dives in Kundalini yoga, we have all sorts of courses and things like that. So it's something for everyone. There's stuff that's free. There's stuff that's deeper dive. There's membership, etc.
You just did something for the full moon just the other day?
Yeah, just a couple of nights ago. It was a blast.
It's a very special moon, I understand, right?
Yeah, well, one of the unique things of this one is it was right with Saturn too, and everyone is talking the blue moon. That's the two full moons in a single month, but this one was significant because, to me, I thought because Saturn was right conjunct next to the moon, just as you could even see it as the moon was rising. There's pictures that are coming out now where you see with really high quality photos of the moon with Shani, Saturn right next, and the rings and everything. And that's important because right now, all this year, and has been for many weeks now, Saturn has been in Aquarius, where he is in India they call it Multrikona sign, where he's the strongest of any other part of the sky. And so really it's Saturn's kind of domain right now. And then this full moon was happening in that same part of the sky that Saturn's been hanging out. It's called Shatabisha, and it's like it's an empty circle as its symbol, but it has a Shakti of healing. And it's often considered a kind of difficult part of the sky, but because it's Saturnian. But that's why, but with Saturn type things, which has to do with death and sickness, but it also has to do with backbone and commitment and like all things like Shiva. And so that's why they chant Mahamrityunjay mantra, because, for Jupiter is a benevolent planet, and they'll put most of the time you put a yellow sapphire on and increase Jupiter energy. There you go. But normally astrologers are pretty skeptical about putting a blue sapphire on for Shani, for Saturn, But what you can always do is chant Mahamrityunjay mantra, the great mantra for Shiva, Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim. And that's considered by most as the best mantra for all things Saturn. So when you have strong Saturn transits like we do right now, and really all year, and the last few years, because for that, he was in Capricorn, and where it's his home, he's strong. And remember in 2020 when we had the grand conjunction where Jupiter and Saturn were together in the sky, well, that's what Jupiter was in Capricorn, where he's like in what they call debilitation, or as a low point, and Saturn was strong. And so the experience from 2020 to 2022 was not very Jupiterian, as expansive and the prosperity is flowing, but it was constrictive. It was very Saturnian. And now we're kind of in this new phase of that, where Saturn's in Aquarius, but it's now more forward thinking, and it's like, okay, rebirthing. And now it's like kind of we have new opportunities for new innovation. And here we come to Bhakti Fest is back. And so now Saturn is in this new phase. Saturn's not all bad. Saturn is what actually helps us have substance in our life, and so, anyways, that's what the full moon made me reflect upon.
I say I have some questions from some viewers, really down to basics. They'd like to know what really is the difference between Western astrology and Vedic astrology by
Yeah.
the Indians.
Yeah. Good
Always,
question.
yeah, everybody, they say, oh, I had my Western chart done. And I usually tell them, really not great until you have your Vedic chart done. And that's really when you get into it. But maybe you can go into it deeper with this.
Yeah, well, my experience is they both can work just fine. The Vedic astrology is using this what's called the sidereal zodiac, and Western astrology uses what's called tropical zodiac. And so you're looking at the same thing, but from a slightly different perspective. If your Vedic astrology follows the zodiac that you actually see in the sky, so if you looked at the full moon a couple nights ago and you took out like the Sky Gaze app, like we have these apps now where you can look at the sky and what constellations, you would see that the moon was in Aquarius. But according to Western astrology, the full moon happened in Pisces. But in the sky, from our perspective on Earth, what we're looking at, the moon isn't actually in Pisces. The moon is in Aquarius. And so that's the sidereal zodiac. That doesn't mean that the Western astrology interpretations can't work. They absolutely, obviously do. There's all sorts of people getting great help and finding that to be their ally. And often it has to do with the intuition of the astrologer, of course. So anyways, though, that's the difference. So if you know your Western chart, like where your sun is or moon is in your Western chart, if you take that and you go back 24 degrees, that'll be the placement of that planet in your Vedic chart. So, or you could just look it up, but it goes, practically speaking, the Vedic astrology is following the zodiac that's 24 degrees behind the tropical zodiac. And that has to do with more complicated things having to do with the precession of the equinox and the way how something like the north pole of the earth is pointing towards what part of the sky at the time of the spring equinox or something, and that changes by a little bit every year. And so at one point the Western and Vedic charts were the same, but over many, many hundreds of years, they've gotten 24 degrees away from each other. It gets a little complicated to really understand the astronomy part of it, but that's, practically speaking, that's the difference, 24 degrees.
Once you establish yourself in the Western, like I'm an Aquarius, and then when you get the Vedic chart done, they tell you you're in something else.
You would likely be a Capricorn.
Correct.
Unless it was like if you were, say, 29 degrees Aquarius, because there's 30 degrees in a sign and it only goes back 24. So sometimes people stay the same sign, but it would be at a much earlier part of that sign. So, but yeah, people will have like identity crisis because they've thought, oh, all along I was a Leo and now you're telling me I'm a Cancer. And my experience is that it tends to get to the same thing because it also emphasizes different. Like usually the first starting point we look at in a Vedic chart is what is the ascendant, not what is the sun sign. And then you look at where is what they call the Lord of the ascendant, the Lagna Lord. And then you start there. And then they tend to look at what's the moon after that. The sun is also important, but it's not emphasized in the same way as it is in Western astrology.
But you do suggest that people have both charts done if they have the opportunity to get the Vedic chart done?
Sure. I mean, I'm just focused only on the Vedic chart. It's too much for me to be working in two different systems. So I find that I like to just focus on my Vedic astrology chart and keep it simple. So I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I think but if people already know their Western, definitely check it out because I think you'll get some of the same insights, but also some different insights that would be totally relevant. And then some people will resonate with it a lot more, actually.
I think it's very, very important that people have their Vedic chart done. I still have mine every year when I'm in India.
Oh, yeah.
Just to see how messed up I did or how I didn't.
Do you find it helpful? You must find it helpful.
Is direction, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, we have our charts done, and then they say this, and that. It's up to us to go out and back into the world, and half the times we don't even remember what that was. Right? We have to refer to something. But I guess when things come up and we get into a situation, we're able to look at it and feel it out on a different level once we have that knowledge and awareness.
Yeah, I always think of it as kind of like a weather report, and it's like, okay, you have a Saturn thing coming up. So, don't expect it to be like the easiest thing. But it's like now is a great time to go deeper into your sadhana, and you'll find that life is going to encourage you to be, because sometimes, and those are the times where our sadhana, our spiritual practice, gets really strengthened. But if you didn't necessarily know to go that direction and you hadn't already developed some type of sadhana in life, you could feel very lost. And instead we end up like on antidepressants and all sorts of, things that can send us more deeper into addictions and so forth and so on. So I think it's tremendously helpful in that regard. It's like, oh, well, maybe not to be too obsessive about the relationship coming your way for the next few months. Maybe during these next few months, maybe work more on yourself. And then I think you'll find that the love might start to flow once that little Venus transit starts to come in. And that type of thing I think is very helpful. To me, I find that tremendously helpful. And I use it like that. I use it like that as I don't use it so much like to try to predict my future or anyone else's, but I use it to understand myself better and understand the weather the kind of more subtle weather that is I'm gonna be experiencing now and in the near future.
Uh, let's talk a little bit about sadhana, and I feel that daily sadhana is very important. Speak about that a little bit from your viewpoint.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's maybe the only thing that has, in a certain way, kept me alive in all these years, and I say that not as a kind of cliche, but as that has been the one thing throughout my adult life that has remained constant. Everything else has changed. That has sadhana. I'm fortunate for me. I've I developed I think I had a pretty good sense of discipline naturally as a Capricorn ascendant. But when I first discovered yoga, and I had a good teacher who really, like you're emphasized the importance of sadhana to me and consistency. And I did buy into that. And my sadhana of what I do has changed. My relationship to it has totally changed. I'm way less neurotic about it than I used to be. I'm much more relaxed, but I'm equally consistent. But when I was young, you're more obsessive, and I probably needed that because I needed more austerity and to really ingrain it into me. But to this day, I don't let a day go by without doing some practice, some sadhana. And it's really the first thing I do. In almost every case, I feel like want I don't want to let a day go by without hitting that opportunity. And I feel better. I feel more like myself, and I feel more clear. And I want the best version of me going out into the world and interacting with we all have such important relationships, people we love, and the state of those relationships have a lot to do with how happy we are in ourselves and how fulfilled we are. Do we feel good about how we've been with the important people in our life, those whom we have deep karmas with, our mother, our father, significant others, our children, our close friends, our coworkers? And so I I feel like the sadhana, no matter what I've had to travel through and go through in my life, the sadhana always was, maybe especially in the hard times, the most valuable thing I did every single day, and is the one thing that always, at least enough, kept me connected to my wisdom, my sense of wisdom in my heart, and gave me the ability, which I don't think I would have had nearly as much without a regular practice, the ability to make a compassionate choice, even if that wasn't the easy choice to make, to choose to be loving, to choose to be kind, even though it would have been much easier to do the opposite. My emotional impulses would have liked to have done the opposite. And that over time has, I feel like everywhere I go, I have friends. I feel like everywhere I go, life is taking care of me, and I attribute that largely to having a consistent practice, and a practice that's not just going through the motions, because from time to time it's not just like the exercises, in my case with Kundalini yoga, but it's the exercises in that case are, to me, a catalyst for the real sadhana to happen. And that's the blossoming of our heart. That's the blossoming of real happiness, and and whatever the practice is. That's like you and I have different things that we do for sadhana, but we're both talking sadhana because we know it's the same thing. It doesn't quite matter, I don't think, as much what the sadhana is, as opposed to what is the person, what is the relationship of the person with the person to their sadhana.
Yeah. So
What do you think?
I always recommend people to start slowly, but maintain a daily practice. Okay.
Yeah.
Some yoga, some meditation, some chanting, some japa mala, like that. Sitting. Important, I find, is to have your set space in your home or in your apartment that's dedicated to you, and nobody else comes around to that space. All my kids know that's my altar. I'm sitting in front of that. That's my seat. That's my pitham. That's what I do, and nobody, comes in and messes around with that, unless it's my kitties that come in and sit on my. That's always allowed.
Yeah, beautiful. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, small amounts. I totally agree. Small amounts done consistently, more desirable than larger amounts, but inconsistently.
How do you take the diet? And let's talk about diet in reference to sadhana as well.
Okay.
Where do you place that? Let's talk a little bit about how you think diet plays an important part in the daily.
Well, I'm really influenced by the Ayurvedic perspective on that, and a yogic perspective as well, which are sometimes slightly different perspectives, because Ayurveda is chiefly concerned with restoring vitality to the body. So Ayurveda, doesn't really have it's not really a system of morality, in the sense that Ayurveda might say, well, that person should have like a meat, for instance. Some people may disagree with that, but at the basic level, Ayurveda is just looking at what is the qualities, and then applying the opposite qualities. So in some cases, they're very, very low vata. Then meat is not out of very, very high vata, and very, very low vitality, and conditions are dire. Ayurveda is not necessarily opposed to giving a person meat, for instance. But yoga would maybe beg to differ a little bit from, not all yogic perspectives, but generally speaking, is that more of a vegetarian diet, because they're concerned predominantly with sattva, with creating the clarity of the mind, so you can have the perception of reality, and decreasing tamas. And so for me, though, I do follow a vegetarian diet, and I find that works quite well. And I find that because my diet is largely sattvic like that, even though I'm not I'm not nearly austere as some people, I eat I'm pretty relaxed about it otherwise, but I eat a vegetarian diet, and I love to eat healthy, and I love to eat fresh, and but I'll enjoy whatever I wish. And over time, the main thing is to bring oneself into a place where you actually desire the food that is healthy for you. And there's that principle in Ayurveda that is when you're out of balance, you tend to desire the things that will maintain that state of imbalance. And when you get into balance, you tend to desire those things that will keep you healthy. And we all experience that if we've done like a cleanse, for instance. And at first you're doing a cleanse and you start having all these cravings for like, that, chocolate chip cookie that was made a couple of days ago. But that's not on the cleanse. And then eventually you hit past that point where the desires for those kinds of cravings have gone. And by the end of the cleanse, all you really, really want is like a delicious salad or something like that is what you're desiring. So that's a little bit of how I think about food sadhana. It's actually trying to discover, using principles of, yoga or whatever the path it is that you're following, but using the principles to actually discover what is good for you, as opposed to just blindly following principles and rules. To me, that doesn't work. I use principles, but I don't use them as rules to be a slave to. I use them as principles to kind of guide my choices so that I can be more connected to my own intuitive sense of things.
Yeah, and this is the problem we have in our country as well as other places. We've been indoctrinated with this false understanding of what diet and what the correct food bases are. And it's all been controlled by the corporations and the governments and the politics.
The food groups of like meat, milk, vegetables that we got as kids.
They want to keep us unhealthy so that we can go to the doctors, so we can get more prescriptions and more medication to keep the
it's a mess.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
But people don't get clarity. But even when they go see their regular doctor, the doctor has no understanding of nutrition. Yeah, absolutely none. They take the 30-minute class in university, and they never talk about diet. They never talk about it. It's really up to the individual to really say, enough is enough. I got to find this path on my own, and I got to listen and study and read and adapt and all this kind of stuff to develop my own personal thing that's going to work best for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's empowering to do that. And hopefully the systems are changing, but you can't depend on that either. And I agree 1,000%. It's a self motivational journey, and nobody can do it for you. Not even a great teacher who does know stuff can do it for you. And at the end of the day, it takes, I got to live in my body. I've got to cross through the doorway of death on my own one day. That's happening. And so I want to live in such a way that I can feel confident in that journey.
Be open to whatever comes your way. Look at it, discuss it, feel it, see how it resonates for you, and either go with it or take a little bit of it or not at all.
Yeah, beautiful.
But
simple.
Exposure, the thing is, we need to constantly expose ourselves to this understanding, to these teachings. So I tell people, have a couple of books by the side of your bed. We don't have to watch Netflix every night. Pick up a book. You don't have to read the whole book in one sitting.
Yeah.
I got 50 books. I open it up. I read a couple of lines. Oh, wow. Fantastic. I read the same line 5 years ago, but I didn't see it this way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the beauty of Dharma teaching, is it never gets old. It never gets old because we've changed, and that teaching, I might have read it 5 years ago, and then it shifted my perspective. And then, the book was by the bed, and you come across the same one 5 years later, and it's something totally different, or something else, another aspect of it that we didn't notice or wasn't relevant yet to us at that time.
Life is changing all the time, Jai, and just have to be open to each and every day and not be controlled by what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
Yesterday's gone already.
So you grew up in where did you grew up in New York?
I grew up in Long Island,
in Long Island.
A small island called Long Beach. It's 3 miles long and a half mile wide.
Yeah.
And at that, they called it America's healthiest city. probably it was fresh air all the time, no pollution.
Really?
We never ate out of a can. My mother always cooked fresh, fresh, fresh.
Oh,
We
what a
didn't know
blessing.
we didn't know about hormones
Right.
and bad eggs or bad this or bad that. And I grew up in a meat eating household.
Yeah, me
You know,
too.
I remember when my mother put down a piece of tongue on my plate. I eat it. I just that was one of the catalysts for me.
For vegetarianism.
That and I went to slaughterhouse upstate New York and because it was for sale. So I said to my friend, let's go so we can see actually what's going on in there. And then when I got in there and I saw this was going on, it was just the lines, the live cattle, the knives, cutting up their throats and the
Mm,
blood. And then I look at their faces and I see all this anguish and anxiety in their face, and that's going right
mm,
into the meat. And I'm
mm,
saying, then I'm going to on my plate, and that still has all that negative energy in there. And that I've always said over the years, and people have argued with me like this all the time, that eating constantly eating a diet of meat like that is going to create some aggressiveness in your nature, and I really feel that that's the case.
mm.
Um,
I
stop
would agree.
and
Yeah.
I
It's
just
problematic
people,
in so many ways, in so many ways. And it's not that the solutions are necessarily always easy, but the solutions are possible. And huge amounts of the Amazon rainforest and other parts of Brazil and the world being destroyed, largely due to the meat industry and also soy, but the soy is being fed to the animals by and large. So, anyways, we could, I'm sure, get on our soapboxes about that, but yeah, it's ridiculous. Even if it's not even about vegetarianism, it's about if you are going to eat meat, it's doing it in a way that is healthy and compassionate and is not destructive and destroying life in so many ways. So yeah, but I agree on that aggressiveness thing. I think there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that.
let's segue into some other stuff. How important do you think we can have a good discussion on this? How important do you think is having a teacher or having a guru in relationship to your sadhana?
Mm. Well, I think it depends, honestly. And I think teachers are extremely important. I think having clarity on on your path is important. I think I'm a Westerner, and we are both Westerners, and maybe some of us Westerners we really adapted into ways of uh, other cultures, like Indian culture, for instance. And however, I think often we know that the concept of gurus and teachers in the West has been both helpful and also problematic because of the power dynamics of gurus and teachers in the Western world, not to just the Western world, it's all over the world. It can be problematic, but this is where I live and this is my experience and this is what I'm concerned about and a part of in terms of as a student and a teacher, as someone I've had extraordinary teachers and I've had teachers that have been abusive and teachers that were abusive that were at other times extraordinary, and it's not so black and white all the time. And so what I think is really important is that we're self-empowered, like we were talking about earlier with food, that we're also self-empowered in regards to our own happiness. And if we're committed, even Dalai Lama, because when you come from traditions that are guru traditions, I'm a Sikh, so we don't have an embodied guru in that same way, because the Sikhs, the guru is everywhere and everything, and it can sometimes be a person. Historically, there was a lineage of 10 Sikh gurus, but the last one said there would be no more living embodied guru as a person. That now the guru would be in actually what we have is called the Sri Guru Granth Sahib, which people call scripture, and it is a scripture, but really what it is, it's also a song book, and it's the whole thing is done in rag, and the whole thing is to listen to the kirtan, and the kirtan becomes the guru. And then the concept expands from even there is even the guru, what they call the Shabad Guru, the guru that comes in the form of sound. And so I think a guru doesn't have to be limited to a person, in other words, but there is a rich legacy and traditions of guru disciple relationships that when it is there is maybe the greatest blessing of all. And so I think as long as the person is knowing that first and foremost, I am responsible for my own happiness. And if I have the blessing and the opportunity to have a guru, then that is a tremendous blessing. But even Dalai Lama said that you should investigate your guru for what do you say, for 10 years before you fully trust them, because in a tradition like that, whatever your guru says goes. You're taking in a tradition, these great spiritual traditions where they understand guru yoga to where you become the devotee of the guru. That concept sometimes when it hits Western culture, of course, we know can collide into really in ways that it just doesn't work all the time, maybe most of the time. But what we shouldn't do is decide that all teachers are horrible, because that's the only thing that is going to be lucrative enough to make a documentary about. Is not a great teacher. It's going to be the abusive stories of that teacher, and those are important stories to be told. However, I also want to see some on, I want the Ama Netflix series. I want there's so many amazing teachers, that it's not abusive, and it's extraordinary. And so I don't have a strong opinion about whether somebody should have a guru or not. I think you already have a guru. And I think it's about listening to that, and that it starts in your own inner consciousness. And it's that actually all of life can act as your guru when you're tuned into it. And if you have a sadhana enough that keeps the mind relatively clear, keeps the prana open, like you're saying, that's why doing something like a Malava Japa mantra, that's why it's so fantastic, because it puts us in that flow where we can experience all of life as teaching us. And if we're blessed to have a person as a guru, like we knew Neem Karoli Baba or Baba or Ram Dass, and then we can feel them in that. But I also don't feel like it's necessary to have a human being to play that role, because I was just down in the Yuba River Canyon yesterday morning, and the wind was blowing, and I felt it along my skin, and I felt like that was my guru. And so, so that's my kind of feeling about it. What do you think?
But you would have been able to feel that had you not had
great teachers. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So people always ask me about this teacher or this guy, and I said, find somebody that you're going to resonate with, okay? And if it's working for you, great. And don't listen to all the stuff that's coming around that, because there's always going to be politics and stuff is going to be brought up about every teacher, about every guru.
Always.
And you just got to. It's always going to be that way. And I like to spend time with truthful teachers and truthful gurus. Right?
Yeah.
If you're telling the truth and I'm watching how you live your life, I'm very prone to hang out with you. That's why I've been with Alma since 1987.
Wow.
First met her.
When she first came over to the U.S., it was 87. I love those recordings, those kirtan. That's like my favorite of all the recordings I've heard of her. Are those like 1980, late 80s, 1987. Those kirtan recordings are so vibey.
And then I invited her to LA, and she stayed at our home for 17 years every time she came to us.
Really? I didn't know that. That's amazing. What a blessing.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going back at the end of this month after I finish with the Bhakti Fest, which I like to talk about for a few minutes. I go back to India and I set up there for like 3 months and just hang out at the ashram.
Amazing. I've never been to Amma's ashram in Kerala. I would love to visit.
Please, invitation. Next time you're there, possibly call me up beforehand. I'll make all the arrangements for you.
Thank you. I would love that.
So you're going to be at Bhakti Fest this year, and you're teaching three workshops, right? I
Yeah.
think Friday. Explain to our audience, our listeners, what they can expect. Like, I'm suggesting everybody come to your class. Absolutely, it's life changing. You're going to have a wonderful experience. More of what we're talking about, but very elaborate. But explain a little bit of it.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna move. It's gonna be there's gonna be definitely an active element to it. We're gonna do yoga exercises, yoga practices, but it's not like it's something you don't need any previous experience at all. Actually, that's one thing I like about it, and we do it. And I like to teach in a way to where it just will meet you where you're at. And the people have been doing it a long time. People just doing the first time. Everybody's kind of doing the same thing, but it just meets you where you're at. And I think what to expect is expect definitely some yoga exercises. You're going to be using your breath. You're going to be probably chanting at times. But all of that is going to be really, those are really the catalysts for this bigger dharma thing that is happening. We're going to be exploring together through the different themes of each of the workshops. I don't have them in front of me at the moment, but whatever that theme is, I'll be giving teachings in that direction, and then we use the yoga practices to help us experience to the exercises, the meditations, the kriyas, the mantras, and the music are there to kind of catalyze the experience of the teaching. So it's not just staying in the intellectual realm, but really getting more embodied and say, I always feel like it's by the end of it, what I want the effect to be is oh yeah. It's like a remembering. I loved what you said, Sridhar, earlier about you just need to constantly like expose yourself to the teaching, expose yourself because it's very much like a remembering. We all experience like that when we go into a deep meditative state and we feel all of a sudden connected to what our life is all about. It's very much a feeling like remembering, like you'd remember a dream almost. And so that's what I feel like. It's dreamy. The music is, I think, exquisite. It's fun. It's lighthearted. Of course, we can get serious. It can go deep, but the overall feel, I think, it's real. It's genuine. It's lighthearted, and it's a good time. And you'll leave feeling like, wow. I would predict. I'm so happy I did that. That's what I think.
Hour and a half class, correct? So don't feel intimidated. You don't have to dress up in your lemon outfit for the.
Doesn't require any costume. Doesn't need any. You don't need a hat. You don't need anything. You just come as yourself.
Is that hat a significance of something?
Yeah, well, the turban is. Yeah, I mean, as a Sikh, it is absolutely. We call it the dastar. It's really which means like crown, and because it's about being connected into really that your royalty doesn't come from bloodline. Your royalty comes from your consciousness and your innate intelligence as a human being. And then, but by putting oneself kind of in that, it helps to create the container. So especially if you are working with spiritual practice, dharma practice, it acts like a helpful container in this particular path. Yeah, in order to help direct your energy in that way. I mean, there's lots of different contexts. Sikhs will, you always know a Sikh when you see a Sikh, because it was said that they say that the Sikhs are helpers, and so you can always trust that person. That was the idea. One of the ideas. They're great warriors of the Punjab, of northern India, at a time when India was it arose at a time when, of course, there was great conflict between the Muslims coming in from the north, and then Buddhist and Hindu culture in India. And the Sikhs were kind of right on that borderline and very much influenced by both, and are really they're all the same river stream. And Guru Nanak was a great sage. He's beloved all over India, but he never gave a lecture, or anything like that. All he did was sing. He traveled with his closest disciple, Bhai Mardana, who was Muslim. Guru Nanak came from a Hindu family, and they would just travel. He walked in his adult life for 30-something years, all the way up to Mecca, all the way to Tibet, and back, and all throughout India. It said that he danced with Lord Chaitanya outside of the Jagannath temple, and there's stories about that you can read. And he never gave a talk. He played the rabab, and Bhai Mardana played the rabab, and he would say, awaken the rabab, like the stringed instrument, the ancient Indian instrument. Awaken the rabab, Bhai Mardana. He said, Bani is coming, word is coming. And then he would sing, and we have all of that. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is that's what became the guru to the Sikhs, was those songs. And they call it Bani. It's like the word, and it's Shabad. It's literally the word of the guru. And so anyways, that's where the Sikhs, where the turban comes from, was much later, when they actually became great warriors, because they in order to protect themselves and to protect others, was very passive religions, or nonviolent, and so forth. So much abuse was happening, and one of the Sikh gurus was tortured to death by the Mughal emperor at the time, and his successor became a great warrior, and the Sikhs became warriors at that time. So you have this blending of both the bhakti of the Guru Nanak part of the path, and then this development, this evolution to where they became yogi warriors, and some of the greatest swordsmen and horsemen and archers, but all based in yoga practice, in spiritual and dharma practice. And so it's tremendous stuff, tremendous stories, great tradition of India is the Sikhs. And so that's where the turban comes out of, that warrior, what they call Sant Sipahi, the warrior sage.
You have to be a Sikh to visit their famous place up in Punjab.
No, absolutely. Quite the opposite. The Golden Temple in Amritsar is it has 4 entrances to it that represents that, regardless of what caste, regardless of what anything, everybody is welcome. And that's the whole idea there. And in fact, that was also part of the turban thing, was because many of those Sikhs were untouchables and low caste, and this was actually saying that no, you're what they called Khalsa, you're pure, and then they gave the men the last name Singh. That's where it comes from. You're lion, and the last name Kaur, you're a princess, you're a lioness. And it was about elevating the identity of the common person. And it was kind of going against the Brahmanical traditions in that sense, and it was uplifting the common person. So everyone is welcome, every caste, every creed.
Fantastic. We have another minute or two. Do you want to leave us with any powerful message? Well, the whole hour has been powerful as far as I'm concerned, but you have anything else you'd like to leave us with? So that we can have a little bit more wisdom before we see you in 2 weeks.
I can't wait for that in 2 weeks. I've been thinking about it and looking forward to it. And yeah, to me, it's just love is the real, at the end of the day, the only real message is that all of this stuff is about being able to love more and more and to experience love more deeply. And as you said, we don't have to, but we enjoy exposing ourselves to the things that takes us into actual love. And to me, that's what bhakti is all about, is actual love. And because romantic love is, fantastic. It's amazing. It's wonderful, but it's short-lived. And so by putting our energy and life force in direction of a type of love that goes to something transcendent of ups and downs, transcendent of togethers and aparts, we get a type of force, a type of love that there's really no words. There's something inconceivable of it, and yet we experience it. And to me, that's devotional love, and that's bhakti. And to have bhakti means to have joy and to have the pleasures of life in a way that is not grasping onto things, because it's the main thing that we're directing our energy to is that which is non-changing. And so you can't grasp onto that. It's too elusive. It's humbling. You try to grasp on it, it'll quickly show you that what you grasp on is not that thing at all. And so that's what comes to my mind. Love. Love transcends the goods and the bads.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Jai Dev Singh. We're going to see you in 2 weeks at Bhakti. Thank you so much. We love this. Let's do it again sometime. I love hanging out with you. And thank you all for watching today. And we look forward to seeing you all again, especially in a couple of weeks. Come to Jai Dev's class. Say hello to me. See me wandering around, which I do a lot of. And blessings to all. Thank you so much. Namaste. And have a wonderful day.